Welcome. We got perfect weather. We've got people moving into Graham Lee's and people moving into Gaines. We've got upper division students helping to move carts in, and a lot of first years settling into the rooms. We're excited for a great year. Welcome, class of 2022.
My name is Bethlehem, and I'm from Glen Burnie, Maryland.
Evan Fopp, I'm from Richmond, Virginia.
Emily Matthews, Jacksonville, Florida.
Marina Lang, Ames, Iowa.
I'm Alex Fedor, and I'm from Salem, Oregon.
Anjali Hoskins from Mississippi.
I'm Tosh Gangler from Delaware.
I'm Rafi, I'm from Pakistan. I love the grass and the mountains. Plus, like, the scholarship program's pretty cool.
I'm Lily White, and I'm from Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
My name's Henry Hoker, and I'm from San Antonio, Texas.
I'm Mac Lyerly, and I'm from Jacksonville, Florida.
Hi, I'm Audrey Martin. I'm from Minnesota.
I'm Kate O'Kelly, and I'm from Atlanta, Georgia.
I'm Katherine Johnson, and I'm from Potomac, Maryland.
Joe from Richmond, Virginia. Well, my brother went here, so I kind of have been exposed to it for a while. But also, I run track, but I also want to do a pre-med track to eventually be a pediatrician. So I felt WNL was a really good fit for me, balancing sports with academics.
Hi, I'm Katie, and I'm from New Canaan, Connecticut.
Hi, I'm Lexi, and I'm from Madison, Connecticut.
I'm Alex, I'm from Japan.
I'm Elizabeth Grice, and I'm from Lexington, Virginia.
I'm Ella Hall, I'm from South Carolina.
I'm Bryn Wilkinson, I'm also from South Carolina.
My name is Kariatu Diallo, and I'm from the Bronx, New York.
I'm Olivia, and I'm from Winter Park, Florida. My mom went to Hollins, which is kind of close by, and so she loved the campus here and like wished she went to Washington only. So this was like one of the first schools she took me to, and she like really wanted me to go here, and I loved it. I fell in love.
Hi, I'm Corey Morris, and I'm from Mumford, Rhode Island.
I'm Ray Wright, San Antonio, Texas.
I'm John Carr Hayden. I'm from Charlottesville, Virginia. It's my first year. I'm Rob Hedgeback from Charleston, West Virginia.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm from Long Island, New York.
Carson Yates, and I'm from Virginia Beach.
I'm Tyler Zidlicki, and I'm from Larchmont, New York.
Hi, I'm Rewatch, and I'm from Nepal.
Hi, I'm Elisa, and I'm from Vietnam.
My name is Ben Barton. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida.
My name is Grace Wise, and I'm from the outside of Philadelphia.
My name is William. I'm from Kenya.
I'm Kenza, and I'm from Morocco.
The liberal arts aspect of it, that's awesome. Like, I just want to dive into every cause.
Same. I really want to know more about everything, all the subjects, and I think the liberal arts is for me.
I'm Sherry Gu, I'm from Wochon, New Jersey.
My name's Ingrid, and I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
My name is Sao Chen, I'm from China.
Hey, I'm from China too. My name is Xiaoling Yu. Okay, hi.
My name is Charlie Cunningham. I'm from Pequod, New Jersey.
I'm Nolan. I'm from Chesterfield, Virginia, right outside Richmond.
I'm Murphy Jones. I'm from Lookout Mountain, Georgia. I'm Emma Aldrich. I'm from Washington State.
And I'm Kate Groninger, and I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
I was actually walking down in between the Science Library and the Center for Global Learning when I got the feeling. The one that they say you're supposed to get when you just like know you're where you're supposed to be. I'm like, wow, this is real. This is home for me, you know?
I'm Jackson Sharman from Birmingham, Alabama.
I'm Jav Brown, and I'm from Charlottesville, Virginia.
I'm Katie Larkin, and I'm from Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
My name's Lucas King, and I'm from Medina, Ohio.
My name's Isabella Daher, and I'm from Massachusetts.
My name's Charlie Foy, and I'm from Pasadena, California. I just wanted to get away from the city, have a break from the busy life of LA, and I wanted to have the best educational experience possible, and I thought WNL was the place for me.
I'm Anna Estrada, and I'm from Bentonville, Arkansas.
I'm Clay Chadwick. I'm from Arlington, Virginia.
I'm Cooper Whitehead, and I'm from Wilmington, North Carolina.
I'm Lane. I'm from Tampa. I'm Lexi. I'm from Ohio.
I'm Jacob from Charleston, West Virginia.
My name's Lauren McCray, and I'm from Atlanta, Georgia.
And I'm Andrew Crean from Stoughton, Massachusetts.
I'm Warner Speed. I'm from Jackson, Mississippi.
I'm Michael Horgan. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina.
I'm Turner Bobbitt, I'm also from Charlotte, North Carolina.
I'm Finn Thorne. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland.
Yes, so I'm Mary Alice Russell, and I'm from Virginia Beach, Virginia.
My name's Tiffany Thomason, and I'm from Oregon City, Oregon. I chose to come to WNL because of the wonderful community that's here, and because they have the academics to match that. It's not just community, it's like excellence too. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, my name's Troy Larson. I'm from Westchester, Pennsylvania.
Joey Dickinson, and I'm from Omaha.
Hi, my name is Camilla Bealey, and I am from North Carolina, but I just moved from Connecticut.
I'm Austin Sherritt, and I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina.
And I'm Stephen Warren, and I'm from Westfield, New Jersey.
My name's Missy Thomas, and I'm from Wiesbaden, Germany.
I'm Robert. I'm from Houston, Texas.
I'm Peyton. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. I chose to come to WNL just because the moment I walked on campus, I felt welcomed by both the students and the faculty. It's beautiful here. I mean, we're in the Shenandoah Valley. The academics are amazing, and I just felt like it was home.
Samantha Johnson, and I'm from Princeton, New Jersey.
So I'm Walker Morris from Atlanta, Georgia.
My name's Sarah Holland. I'm from Palmyra, Pennsylvania.
I'm Kushali and I'm from India. And I chose WNL because it just struck me so much because of the small community size and especially the honor code, because I come from a family from a military background and that is just embedded in my blood, and I think that's the thing that struck me the most. And I'm looking forward to joining clubs and starting classes for the first time and meeting a lot of amazing individuals.
What's up?
So what is this about?
Oh, I know. Despite the legacy we have left.
Okay. Good evening and welcome. While our distinguished panel is putting on their microphones, I thought I would make the use of that time while we're kind of getting ourselves organized here to go ahead and get started with our introductions. I promise you the type is big, so we have quite a bit to talk about. Welcome to the 66th Journalism Ethics Institute at Washington and Lee, sponsored by the James S. and John L. Knight Foundation and the Department of Journalism and Mass Communications at Washington and Lee. We are titling this evening, Keeping Our House in Order, Being Ethical While Under Attack. I'm Kevin Finch, Assistant Professor of Journalism and the co-organizer of this institute, along with longtime program assistant Joan Millen. Normally our Knight Chair of Ethics, Ali Colon, would be standing here, but he happens to be on sabbatical right now. I have the privilege to have watched him over the years as he's conducted several institutes and Art Brisbane before him. I would be remiss if I didn't also salute our first two Knight Chairs, Ed Wasserman and the late Lou Hodges. I'd also like to recognize Gene Foreman, the author of the student's textbook and the companion ethics course that goes along with this institute, of which this institute is a key element. As a matter of fact, Mr. Foreman's book is The Ethical Journalist Making Responsible Decisions in the Digital Age, and it has given us a compelling, well-written, and thought-provoking series of lessons. And Mr. Foreman is right here if you'd like to say hi there. Mr. Foreman goes back to the Philadelphia Inquirer in years where they were doing Pulitzer after Pulitzer and had an exceptional career as the managing editor of that publication, and we're really happy to have this book. I'd like to recognize our department head, Tony Losi, is somewhere. I saw her. I know I did. There she is in the middle. And all of our faculty who are here tonight for this event. And we also have administration representatives here, including our provost, Mark Connor, and others. There he is. Okay, thank you. This remarkable program has brought to Lexington the likes of network anchors and executives, top newspaper editors, digital journalists, radio executives, and more. Names such as Dean Baquet, Helen Thomas, Dan Rather have served as keynotes for this public event. This time we're taking a different approach. You see before you not one but 6 distinguished journalists, and instead of a speech, we will have a conversation about the state of journalism and how the reliable old standby, good ethics, is the key to thriving in an era when we are indeed, as an industry and individuals, under attack. Let's meet our guests tonight. First is Chris Suarez, an award-winning journalist who writes about the counties of Henrico and Hanover for the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Suarez was previously at the Daily Progress in Charlottesville. As the paper's City Hall reporter, he covered politics, local elections, budget development, poverty, real estate projects, and housing issues. About a year into that job, well before the Unite the Right rally in August 2017, Suarez started reporting on the community debate around the city's Confederate statues, which led to the infamous white supremacist march in Charlottesville. Earlier this year, the Virginia Press Association named Suarez its Outstanding Young Journalist of the Year. Judges for the contest exalted his coverage of local matters as well as events tied to the deadly rally as meticulously reported and clearly written. Suarez returned to Richmond this summer after accepting a job offer from the Times-Dispatch. He's a 2014 graduate of Virginia Commonwealth University. Alicia Montgomery has devoted much of her career to elevating the stories of communities that have been underserved or overlooked by traditional media. She currently serves as Senior Supervisor Editor-Producer for NPR's Morning Edition. Most recently, she was the editorial director for regional news at WAMU in Washington. That's the NPR member station there. Montgomery also led NPR's Code Switch and helped launch the team's successful podcast, named by the New York Times as one of the best new podcasts of 2016. Prior to that, Montgomery served as lead editor of the Michael Martin Going There live event series. She was also part of the leadership team of NPR's sourcing diversity effort. She has been recognized with awards from the National Association of Black Journalists and the Native American Journalist Association. Montgomery was also one of the editorial and production leaders through the 7-year run of Tell Me More. In that capacity, she edited Michael Martin's Murrow Award-winning essay series, Can I Just Tell You? She spent 2 years reporting for Salon.com, covering the 2000 presidential race and its aftermath, and has been published in the New York Times Magazine and the NAACP periodical The Crisis. Kirk Vonner is the news director for WSPA TV and WYCW, the Nexstar Broadcasting-owned CBS and CW affiliates in the Greensboro, Spartanburg, Asheville market. Almost got that right. That too, Greenville. Thank you, thank you there. I appreciate it, Kirk. Okay, he's been a news director and the equivalent, that is, of an executive editor of a newspaper for leading stations in Buffalo, New York, Hartford, New Haven, Connecticut, and Cincinnati. Before joining SPA in 2015, he got his start as a photographer for WCBD TV in his hometown of Charleston, South Carolina. Later, he served as executive producer for CBS's flagship station, WCBS TV, in New York City. He's an innovator, and his role as VP for local news with Time Warner Cable in the 1990s, he oversaw the creation of 10 local 24-hour news channels across Florida, Texas, North Carolina, and New York. In the 1980s, Kirk was the first news director for ESPN's Sports Center, where he launched NFL Game Day and NFL Prime. He is a winner of a Peabody Award for exposing problems with spare parts produced for the U.S. military's Black Hawk helicopters, and his newsrooms have won multiple Emmy Awards. Joey Chen became director of Northwestern University's Medill programs in D.C. just earlier this year. And it's a homecoming of sorts. Chen is a dual alumna of the program, holding a BSJ and MSJ from Medill. She's a daughter of a Northwestern professor emeritus and grew up within walking distance of the university's main campus. After graduation, she reported for local TV stations in Charleston, South Carolina, and then Atlanta. That led to anchor positions with CNN International and later for the flagship network. During her decade at CNN, she anchored The World Today with Wolf Blitzer and the daily town hall Talk Back Live, among others. In the early 2000s, Chen joined CBS News as a Washington correspondent, covering the White House, Capitol Hill, and other D.C. beats for the CBS Evening News. And she was also a contributor to my favorite news program on TV, CBS Sunday Morning. At the launch of Al Jazeera America, Chen was named the host of the network's primetime flagship current affairs program, America Tonight. Among her awards are Emmys for coverage of the Centennial Olympic Park bombing in Atlanta and coverage of the D.C. sniper attacks. She was nominated for a third national Emmy for her writing of a documentary re-examining the Emmett Till lynching and its connection to the Black Lives Matter movement. Chen has long been active in diversity efforts and journalism education. She's a longtime member of the Asian American Journalists Association and has participated in nearly every one of its J camps for multicultural high school students. She served as a member of the Accrediting Council for Education in Journalism and Mass Communications, ACEJMC, and on its site team visits. Manny Garcia is the Ethics and Standards Editor for USA Today Network. Manny formerly served as editor for the Naples Daily News. He spent 23 years as a reporter and editor at the Miami Herald and El Nuevo Herald. He's known for building diverse teams whose work has jailed public officials, exposed sex trafficking, changed laws, protected taxpayers, and helped free an innocent man serving life in prison for murders he did not commit. He and his newsrooms have won the Pulitzer Prize, the Goldsmith Prize for Investigative Reporting, IRE Awards, and the National Edward R. Murrow Award. In September, Manny won the Robert G. Magruder Award for Diversity Leadership from the Associated Press Media Editors and the American Society of News Editors. He's the former president of Investigative Reporters and Editors and serves on the boards of both ASNI and the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. He views journalism as a calling. Manny, who was born in Cuba, graduated from Miami-Dade College and Florida International University. And finally, Carol Marine is the co-director for the Center for Journalism Integrity and Excellence at DePaul University upon graduation from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She began her career as a reporter and anchor for WBIR TV in Knoxville, Tennessee, and later WSM in Nashville. In 1978, she returned to her hometown of Chicago, where she began her decades-long career as a primetime news anchor for WMAQ TV Channel 5. In 1997, Maureen moved to CBS News, where she worked as an investigative reporter for the network-owned station WBBM TV in Chicago and as a correspondent for the network's 60 Minutes, 60 Minutes 2, and the CBS Evening News. In 2002, Maureen and fellow producer Don Mosley left CBS to form their own company, Marine Corps Productions, producing hour-long documentary-style pieces for CNN Presents and the Discovery Channel, among others. Her involvement with DePaul began in 2003 when she and Mosley founded the DePaul Documentary Project, and in 2016, she and Mosley became co-directors of DePaul's Center for Journalism Integrity and Excellence, which promotes the highest ideals of journalism through theory and practice. Today, Maureen juggles her leadership at the center with her work as a political editor of NBC5 and as a regular contributor to the PBS affiliate WTTW's Chicago Tonight. Her work has earned 2 Peabody Awards, 2 National Emmy Awards, 2 Alfred I. DuPont Columbia University Awards, along with a George Polk Award and a Gracie Award from the American Women in Radio and Television. DePaul presented her with an honorary degree in 1998, and she has been inducted in the Chicago Journalism Hall of Fame and the Silver Circle of the Chicago Midwest chapter of the National Academy for Television Arts and Sciences. And we went with Carol last because she is going to serve as moderator for this evening's discussion. And after that gets going and we go through a few rounds, we're going to seek out your questions at an appropriate time, as you can hear from all of these talented and interesting folks. So Carol, please take it away.
Kevin, thank you so much. May I just ask our students who were with us today, will you stand up for just a second, if you don't mind? I have to say, and I think I speak for everybody on the stage, we are so impressed with you, with your questions, with your thoughts, with your analysis. It's been stunning. And so this university, I know, is already proud of you, and we are knocked out by you. Thank you so much.
Bravo. Bravo.
So let's kick this off with the most talked about event this week, and that would be a news conference in the White House with President Trump, at which a number of correspondents, first and foremost Jim Acosta, tangled with the president. And I think a lot of people in America are debating what we do, how we do our jobs, and whether what was done there was news appropriate or not. And so, Manny, let me start with you, if I may, as a standards guy.
Well, I was processing it, but my view is simple. I've covered government, I've covered hostile governments and leaders, and my view is when you have a politician or an administration or a government where they start calling you names and they can't attack your work directly, they call you fake news or call you a loser. When they start using terms like that, you've won, you're leading. Because if they can't undercut your work, your journalistic work, I think that's the imperative. So I need to make sure that everyone knows and hears that what's important for us as journalists is to stay focused on the task at hand, is holding government accountable. You're going to be attacked, and it's for us, we also have to be ambassadors and tell our stories in a dispassionate manner where we defend what we do through our work. So always remember, it's the quality of the journalism that has to hold up to scrutiny, and we have to be able to defend that. But we can go back and forth, and I want to hear from the rest of the panel, but my view has always been that when I get attacked, I try to calm it down. I'm going to avoid engaging with someone and get into a fight that turns into a sound bite or something that ends up on social media, because as we saw with the video with Acosta, things can get distorted.
So Kirk, a very smart, well-educated Republican friend of mine fires off an email and says, I hope you don't know Jim Acosta because he wouldn't be welcome at our ranch in Montana. Not everybody in the nation has much sympathy or much empathy for the press corps in that room, do they, or Jim Acosta?
Well, no, and it's because we've allowed ourselves to be demonized. We've allowed ourselves to do that violation of the paramount rule in journalism. We've become the story. And I think it's a difficult place to be. I've never been a Washington correspondent. I'm a local TV guy. I've spent my entire career working in communities around the country, and now back in my native South Carolina, where Donald Trump had his first and perhaps most successful political debate and began his real road to the White House, in my mind. But I think it's still a struggle because I think so many members of the press, myself included, are having to try to relearn the fact that we're not playing by the Canterbury rules anymore. This is uncharted territory. We are dealing with someone who is a master of media manipulation, and I think if you just engage on the standard reporter subject level, you're going to be seen, as your friend would point it out, as hostile and the enemy, or God forbid, the enemy of the people. I think we're having to learn on the fly how to reframe the role we play, the questions we ask, and find that space that allows us to do the job, to do it with dignity, to do it and do it with some respect, but understanding that we're playing almost by schoolyard rules at the moment, because it's, you know, I keep waiting for some reporter to engage with the President of the United States with the words, well, we know what you are, what does that make me? Because it's that level of conversation, or I said that backwards, it should go the other way around, but it could work either way. And I think that's the premise we live in, but journalists have always been people who had to defend the profession because it's never been as honorable as we think it should be when we go into it. And for so many people, we are one step above the personal injury lawyers who litter our broadcasts with advertisements. And I just think it's about keeping your head down, it's about doing the work. And I don't know Jim Acosta, but I think the question that any rational person would ask is, are you doing your best to get the story, or are you doing your best to become the story?
So Joey, you know Jim Acosta, you know Peter Alexander, who stood up to defend Jim Acosta. You know most of the people in that room. And I'm curious, Peter Alexander stood up to defend Jim Acosta, but the rest of that room did not appear to. What's your take on what the press corps should or should not be doing?
Yeah, there are a few things in that. There's a lot packed into all of this. I think I share Kirk's concern about the reporters becoming the story. I would applaud Peter for standing up to say what he believes, that his colleague, Jim Acosta, a guy who's literally his competitor, is an honest reporter and is trying to do his job well. The circumstances were challenging on any level, but I do think it is the responsibility of the journalists in the room to remember that they are journalists first. When I look at the students that we've seen today, and I've heard you talking, and you guys are really, as Carol said, so admirable in your caution, your concern, your maturity, your thoughtfulness about your ethical responsibilities. And I think for people who criticize reporters and say, oh, you know, you're fake news, you're purveyors of fake news. Look, I look at these young people and I think, no, I don't think a single one of them is interested in purveying fake news. I think they really are very serious about what they do and about the careers that they want to have. And I think when they go out there and when somebody's paying them to do this, I expect them to maintain the same level of commitment to the truth, to following the facts where they lie. I think being a reporter in Washington today is as hard as it's ever been, and much harder than when I was a correspondent. I was a correspondent at the White House and on the Hill for CBS, and I will tell you, I don't think that we had to work as hard. And I think actually that's kind of a good thing, that reporters do have to be on their toes at every moment. I do think that that is their responsibility. I do think, in a sense, in my generation, maybe we're a little bit lazier. Maybe we accepted what was delivered from the podium as fact and regurgitated it out. I think in many senses, there is a certain responsibility that people have taken on in the White House press room now. I don't think it's easy. I don't think it always goes right. I don't think that there's only one side that's at fault here. I think that it is hard not to get wound up in the emotions of the room. I think it is hard for reporters who are being criticized quite constantly in the field, those who have followed the president at different sort of rallies and events, found themselves under a great deal of attack. I know a number of our students faced a lot of abuse and conflict just trying to do the jobs that they want to do. But I also think that they have to remind themselves on a daily basis, and all of you will too, that you are not the story, that it is your job, despite how difficult it ever gets, to continue to work and to focus on facts and to focus on details and reporting them. And will it be lousy some days? Yes. Yes. People will give you a hard time for just trying to do your job.
So, Chris,
but you still have to do it.
Do you get blowback on a local level from viewers based on what some of them see in Washington, and they extrapolate that what they don't like in Washington, they don't like in local news either?
Yeah, like a little bit. You know, there's just a lot of people who, whenever they see things that don't like reported, are quick to just cast it off as, oh, that's fake news. And it's kind of hurtful because like you spend a lot of time working on it and developing leads and talking to sources. But you know, it's sometimes you just got to look away. You can't just be looking at comments or social media. You can't let yourself, you know, that'll be a distraction.
And going back to that news conference, Alicia, one of the things we also saw was Yamiche Alcindor, a woman of color, standing up and asking very dispassionately about nationalism and white nationalism. And the president told her that the question was racist. Was it racist?
No. That was a very easy question compared to what everybody else got here. One of the sort of challenges of this president in this environment is that the way that the president frames these issues, everything is about a personal attack. The fact of the matter is the reporters are there to ask the president difficult questions. He is the president of the United States. And the president is there to answer those questions. And saying no would have been an answer that he could have given. But what we see from this administration a lot of the time is just an objection to being asked. And when you're a private citizen or a very rich and powerful person in New York City or a television star, you are free to cuss out a photographer. You're free to do this when a camera comes toward you. When you're president of the United States, that comes with the job. And I think one of the challenges of having somebody who's not sort of a traditional politician is that he responds to these questions as if they're personal. And they are not personal. These reporters are just doing their work.
So in our newsrooms, and we had discussions about this today, about our own diversity. And just jump in, any of you, on this one. Are our newsrooms sufficiently diverse to have any real appreciation of Trump supporters?
Well, I'll speak to that. I live in a part of the country that's a very deep red, went overwhelmingly for the president, has a large population of constituents who would tell you that they think he's doing a great job and endorse the results of the presidency. What's interesting to me at this exact moment in time is the relationship between the press and the country, let alone the presidency, has been so toxically impacted by the fact that there are no holds barred, in the sense that if you're going to label the press the enemy of the people, it's such a classic piece of disinformation. The tools that are being used here are not just, with all due respect, somebody who may not necessarily be a great politician. These are the tools of somebody who wishes to defeat his enemy, promote his own agenda, and works as if we should all hail them, no matter what good or bad they are. And the challenge for the press at this point is to do the job of holding the people in office accountable, but understanding that that accountability for a lot of people isn't the same degree of concern or even the sense that there's anything wrong. That the wrongness is in the folks who have the temerity to ask the questions because of the tools that have been used. I would point you towards a great podcast. Brian Stelter of CNN this week in his Reliable Sources podcast interviews a linguist, Professor Emeritus from Berkeley, who talks about the way President Trump communicates and how in a press conference he communicates in a way specifically to create the combative environment that ensues. That's the kind of thing where, as a journalist, can we not take the bait? Can we have a newsroom that's sufficiently diverse enough, experienced enough, thoughtful enough to go, wait a minute, something's going on here, and we can either choose to play that, or we can choose to try to do our job in the way we know we're supposed to do it, but understanding that we're in a hostile environment.
So that's a great question, but Manny, what's the answer?
So, I will tell you this. In 2016, right before the election, we were on editor calls in Ohio, Wisconsin, Tennessee, and these are senior editors running our newsroom and saying, we have to stop running these polls that say, or consider running these polls that say that Clinton is going to win. She's not going to win. Meanwhile, you had these polls coming, she's marching into the front door in order to say, don't. That's impacting her credibility. So why does this happen? Again, the reason when you succeed is when you have reporters in these communities. The advantage that our company does, USA Today, is if you look at our map, it's 109 newsrooms all around the country. We're in the Rust Belt, we're in these communities, Lafayette, Louisiana. So this is how you build trust, because it's the day-to-day stories. We talked about this earlier over lunch. It's very difficult to parachute into a town. You've all seen the stories either in print, websites, or television about, we're in this diner this morning, and Joe, and you just can't parachute into a diner and expect people are going to develop a level of trust with you and open up. It's not going to happen. Very, very hard. So we are...
Or you get very myopic in the way you view it. Whether they're honest with you or not, your inclination as a human being is to think this is the whole story in this document.
It is. And so even looking at polls or exit polls, no. It's that day-to-day building a relationship with readers. I'll leave you with this piece here from the Tennessean. One of the very successful campaigns going on in there, it's by the editorial page director, David Plazas. There's a civility campaign happening now in Tennessee that's been going on. It's bringing both sides together, whether it's red and blue. But the point is that the discussion point is, what's the future of Tennessee that we can build together? See, that's creating coalition. It's not a discussion in Washington. There was a big division going on between who was going to win the Senate race there. But there's these discussions happening below the surface. That's what matters. And I'll tell you, I get more calls in my job from readers from everywhere who say, keep doing the work that you're doing, keep doing the work that you're doing. That's what matters. Educate yourself.
I'd like to speak up about what it means to have an appropriately diverse newsroom. And I think that sometimes we get very caught up in counting people. And you have to start somewhere, because if things aren't counted, then they're not measured, then there's no accountability. But having Black and brown and LGBTQ and disabled people in the newsroom is not the same thing as listening to them. And it's not the same thing as letting their input shape decisions. If what you're doing is and forgive me because we're on a college campus, if what you're doing is you're getting enough diverse looking people to put in the college catalog so you can point to them, then that's not really achieving the goal. And beyond that, if you are taking all of those people from sort of the same socioeconomic perspective, from the same set of political values and experiences, then you are also failing in getting a newsroom that's prepared to cover this country. As sort of a person who's spent a lot of time in sort of racial diversity in media, one of the things that I've noticed is that the same mistakes that we as journalists make in covering Trump voters is, it's the same set of mistakes that we have in covering communities of color, which is we don't really know anybody in those communities, which is that we rely on our assumptions about those communities to shape our stories, which is we only go in there when something is wrong, when there is a fire or a disaster or a riot, or when they vote for somebody who we don't understand why they voted for this person. And when you only show up to a community to say, what's the matter with you people, then you're not going to get a good story out of that community. You're not going to get the trust of that community. And at this time, when we keep saying that, oh, we're the champions of freedom, one of the reasons why we're vulnerable to these attacks is that not everyone, but there are a lot of media outlets that have not established the trust with the audience. And so we're not credible. And so it's easy for someone like Donald Trump, who's been paying attention to those communities in a way that frankly a lot of us haven't, to come in and label us because we haven't established a separate identity for ourselves.
So Chris, when people watch television, and a lot of our students here don't watch television, right, except on your phone, but where viewers do, don't they get confused when they see Lester Holt, but then they see MSNBC with a lot of opinions, or CNN with a lot of opinions, but CBS doing a straight newscast? I mean, do we in this business, print and television and radio, do a good enough job of differentiating between the news side and the opinion side, do you think?
I think that's getting, it's kind of, it's getting blended a little bit, and it is a little weird, especially with the big cable networks. I mean, just the other week, I think it was actually earlier this week with who was it? Sean Hannity, right? When he went in front of and spoke in front of the Trump rally after saying, he's like, I'm not going to be doing that. And then he calls everyone, all the reporters, like, it's all fake news. Even his own Fox News, reporter there. I mean, it gets confusing. So it is a little weird that you have this, a lot of this television, and even on social media. I mean, a lot of this multimedia packages, the videos, and you can see it from so many different websites that you follow. And it's presented as news, but there's always going to be the spin. And I think, that's how a lot of people get informed. So, and I think as we're moving away from watching, the 6 o'clock local broadcast or the newspaper, people's perception of journalism seems to be something other than what it has been traditionally.
So what's the solution here? What do we do?
Well, I do want to speak to the fact that I think something Manny said that's resonated with me is that localism still matters. And people have, in every survey poll I've seen of recent memory, people have far more trust in the people who live in their towns, who report in their towns, who do the news on television or radio or newspapers, those are the people who are on the ground, and they're also accountable because you see them occasionally at the store or wherever. And they
can pronounce the names of the streets.
Exactly.
They know.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, localism matters.
Right.
If somebody shows up here and mispronounces the name of the next town over, well, you pretty much know they ain't from around here. So I think that that's a piece of this puzzle. But I think the other thing that really, really matters at the end of the day is the recognition that journalists are human beings. And I think at times we can try to forget that in trying to be so without opinion, in trying to be so without bias, without fear or favor, that we occasionally put ourselves up on a pedestal. And it's important to remember that the folks who are our customers, our audiences, our viewers, our readers, don't always separate the entities that are the media. We use that term collectively and throw everybody in the same hopper. And I'm always taken back to my first news director's job in Buffalo, New York, in which a caller called one day and was very irate about something Dan Rather had said on the CBS Evening News. Mm-hmm. And she said to me, "I would like for you to walk down the hallway and tell Mr. Rather that he's an idiot." And I felt guilty about this ever since, but I did say, "Yes, ma'am, I'll get right on that." Mr. Rather, of course, was in New York City and didn't know me from a hole in the wall. But the point being is that I was a CBS affiliate. This woman called the local CBS affiliate, and she wanted satisfaction. I fast forward you to Wednesday's press conference, also known as the latest episode of Worldwide Wrestling. And there was a caller about 30 minutes in who said, and I quote, "When are you going to take this crap off and put the soap operas back on?" And I said, "Well, we don't really control that. That's done out of New York. And thank you, sir, for your comment." And I hung up the phone and I thought, a guy has just called me and said he wants the soap operas back on. That says everything you need to know about a lot of thinking in this country at the moment about what's important and what's not. And I think it's going to continue to be, as always, evolving the industry, evolving the business, but also in the fact that you as consumers have to be smarter people. You have the ability to access in your pocket more news sources than any one person can ever read. And it's impressive to me the number of people who are smart and informed consumers, but there are also a lot of folks out there who are not the same and who don't do that. And so I think the dialogue in this country has to return to, can we have an argument about something without it becoming an attack, without it becoming personal? Because my belief is, as long as nobody insults your mama, then you're able to have a conversation and shake hands at the end of it and agree to disagree.
Chris?
So something, as far as I think that we need to be careful about as journalists and in this industry is, so the newspaper I work at, the Richmond Times-Dispatch, our editorial board has recently decided that we are no longer going to do endorsements for the presidential elections.
Yep.
And in the editorial, our editorial board said something along the lines of like, it's people don't seem to understand that there's a difference between the editorial page and the news. And I saw tons of people saying online like they think we're all idiots.
Right.
So I don't know. I'd like to hear if I could ask a question. Like, what do you guys? How do we kind of manage that? Like, how do we respectfully distinguish the two and not make...
Well, it's interesting to me because local television stations traditionally don't editorialize. They don't have opinion pages. They don't have those sections. And one of the reasons for that, by the way, is that local television stations are licensed by the federal government.
Though they used to.
Yeah.
I mean,
Some.
in the day,
back in the day,
they used to have an editorial director who gave an opinion for the management, and then that kind of went away.
Sure, absolutely. But the point being is that it's harder than ever, mainly because there are so many people who use the word news on what is clearly an opinion product, and that line isn't distinct anymore in a lot of venues. So I don't disagree with the premise that it's hard to separate the two, but it's it's going to continue to be a question.
Well, we don't educate on civics. We don't, if you dial it back to grammar school and high school, we have students, those of us who teach, who can't name the 3 branches of government, and they're in college, or don't know the difference between a local and a federal court. So we have work to do as a society, don't we?
I think that as an industry, we also have to accept responsibility. I think that one of the reasons, again, why sort of distrust in institutions is so low is that anytime somebody criticizes us, our impulse, and this isn't any specific organization, is to deflect and to get defensive. I think that a lot of news organizations purposely blur the line between opinion and news because opinion is more fun, it's cheaper, it's much easier to get 2 professors to come onto your set and yell at each other than it is
yelling professors.
No, that's NPR.
That's right. Commentators, bloggers, you get 2 people on the set to yell at each other, and people get really excited about that. People get their biases confirmed. It is a lot slower and it's a lot more expensive to hire a reporter and set that reporter off to talk to 10 people and come back with a story that says there's some good on this side and there's some good on that side, and this wonderful idea didn't work, and this idea that we thought was terrible has some good points. And to write that story, it's not sexy, it doesn't get as many clicks, and a lot of news decision makers decide that they need to have 2 people yelling at each other
and it's so hard
to pay the
to
bills.
tweet.
It is
so hard to
It's
tweet.
really hard.
Before Kevin begins to take the microphone through the audience, this is one last question, and it's looking for a really short answer. And I'm just going to start down there with you, Manny. Why do you still believe?
Because there's no greater profession. You short of going into the mission field. If you've flown safely on a 737 jetliner, you need to thank a reporter for doing that. We've solved civil rights killings. We've solved serial killings. We put people in jail. We protect your public. We break up sex trafficking rings. And some of the best work I've just told you about is being done. There's great work being done by college students today. And I'm telling you, support your local newsrooms, talk to your colleagues, and invest in us. I just believe in this thing, and I will, because it's a calling. In fact, there's a Bible verse, and I'm going to throw it out there. Look it up, Luke 12, 2 and 3. Whatever is done in the darkness will come out in the light. Whatever is whispered in closets will be shouted from the rooftops. And that's what we do to investigate and bring truth to light.
All right.
I got to follow that?
No,
Yeah.
Since the folks lived in the caves, storytellers have been the people amongst us who have affected the most change. The idea that there are people who are willing to go out and find the story no matter where it is, whether it's on a battlefield somewhere or the back alley of an urban area, but the idea of exposing, bringing truth to the masses matters. I've always been impressed by the corporate motto of what is now just the Scripps Corporation, but for many years was Scripps Howard, give people light and they will find their way, to me matters. I think if you can be a person who brings the light, not only is it important to do, when you do it well, there's no greater self-satisfaction about it. And I think that once you've done that, or you've worked with people who've done that, it's addictive and you just want to keep doing it. And if you do it well, you can find a modicum of respect for it.
Joey?
What do I believe? I believe because of you. I believe because there are young people who want to go out and find facts and tell stories and get information. And when I hear that that's what you really want to do, I am moved by that. I know that we live in a time where we have greater access to information than ever before. And I am actually relieved to see you stuffing your faces in phones. Because when you're not playing some weird game called Fortnite, when you're not doing that, you are gathering information at light speed, at beyond light speed. And I think people are actually seeking it out. There was a time not long ago when I was starting out in this business where we were worried, oh, people are becoming so apathetic, they don't care, they don't watch our newscasts, they don't listen, they don't read, they don't. But I see, even though people are walking into walls when they've got phones in front of their faces, I see people seeking out information, and I see young journalists wanting to deliver the story, and that is as good a reason as any to believe.
Mm-hmm. Chris?
I still believe in holding people accountable, people with power, people in government, and informing the public, keeping them educated.
Truth is real. It can be messy. It is not often profitable. It needs defenders. It needs people out there who are dedicated to protecting it and sharing it. And as frustrating as it can be to see facts disregarded and people sort of just dump on this industry that's sort of dedicated to giving out this information, we can't stop. People before us faced all sorts of dangers. People in our profession put their lives on the line in many cases to bring these stories out, and to give up because somebody, even a very powerful somebody, even loads of people on the internet call us a couple of bad names, just feels like sort of a little bit of cowardice, and also sort of letting down this really important mission. So.
And in truth, since 1992, 1,385 journalists have been killed around the world, most recently Mr. Khashoggi. I'll answer my own question if I may. I still believe, because there isn't a day since I became a reporter that the people in this country and in this world didn't teach me something I just didn't know or wouldn't have seen if I hadn't had the privilege of doing this work. So thank you all, this panel, and the students, and Kevin, take it away.
Okay, now it's time to hear from you. So anybody with a question for a member of this august panel?
Wow. Please, somebody.
And I'm not an avid social media consumer or television consumer or any of that stuff. But when I look at it, all these things seem to get equal weight. The truth, the BS, the hallucinations, the fistfights. And how can the news industry and news media, the real news media, sort of cut through some of that and let people know, wait a minute, what we're telling is actual and is a fact, as opposed to all this other stuff that we're seeing through your feeds all the time.
And who would like that one?
I think we have to slap ourselves around sometimes. I mean, I think that there is sort of that, are we getting too wound up in personality? Are we getting too, are we doing it to ourselves? Are we getting sucked into things that are not the story? Are we losing focus? And I think that we do. I think it's sometimes almost inevitable that we do, but I think, there is sort of a self-examination on this. Are we actually reporting the story, or are we just reporting the smoke? And that, I think that's our responsibility. I think that's on us to do it to ourselves, to hold the mirror up to ourselves as well.
But it's also up to the consumer. My mother used to call me, and my mother loved me, but she would call me and say, you people. during the Clinton impeachment, my mother, a devout Catholic and a devout Democrat, called me and said, "I just don't believe what you're doing." And I go, Mom, hold on. You know, that happens to be an impeachment and a trial. But my mother saw what my mother believed. Sometimes I think even if we do our best work, and we don't always by any means, there are also biased viewers and people who take their own expectations to what they see. And we can't be responsible for that, only what we do. And it's hard to be a news consumer these days because there's too much jamming our circuits. And some of it is smoke and mirrors and junk.
There's a thirst for well-reported stories, transparency. The students really talk today about transparency. You have to be able to show how your stories are reported, what's your attribution, where did you get your facts from. More and more readers are thirsty. I mean, you know, to their credit, they challenge us. How did you use this fact? Why did you quote so-and-so? So really being able to defend your work with transparent explanation of your reporting and how you stood up that story.
PolitiFact, too. You know, the fact-checking news operations have really been doing a great service. Kevin, where are you?
I'm right here. Thank you very much. For those over 30, I'm Phil Donahue. Anybody else? Well, the gentleman in the back there happen to know.
It's certainly encouraging that audiences want information, and a lot of audiences want thoroughly reported factual information. You all have talked about the difficulty of seeking truth and reporting it, and under the best of circumstances, and speaking truth to power. I want to throw another monkey wrench in the works, and that, of course, is the economic state of the industry. Talk about, if you will, and this is directed to no one in particular, how much more difficult, if it makes it more difficult, the current economic state of the industry is for journalists to tell the truth and speak truth to power.
It's a great question.
How many hours do we have? Listen, I think you have to start at the point of understanding the industry of journalism or media, depending on which way you want to look at it, has been so profoundly changed in such a short period of time. The fact that everybody in this room has one of these devices that's a screen. It's the first thing they look at in the morning, probably the last thing they look at night. They use it to communicate, they use it to read, they use it to play games, but it's an always-on medium, and it was built on the internet culture that everything should be free. I mean, the idea of paying for a subscription for a news service is still one that's being debated in the business office of every media organization you know of. The only two really successful models that are in play at the moment are the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. And everybody else is trying to figure out, how do we monetize, a word I despise, but it's one I have to be aware of because I'm responsible for the business side of my newsroom as well as the editorial side. And I think as long as we haven't found a way yet to make the business of journalism make 100% sense in an era where information has always been free, but is so readily accessible on so many platforms, and so many people can be citizen journalists, if you'll pardon that term. It's just, you know, it's tough at the moment for people who look at the numbers and dollars and cents. And I think the effort of Civil, which was an idea of using a Bitcoin blockchain model to fund journalism, will be something that's going to be talked about, explored. But the honest answer to the question is, I don't know, because I don't know what the economics look like because it changes. I'm sorry.
No, it's shifting towards a subscriber model rather than the advertising model. And so we've seen success, as has really the Boston Globe has had a very successful run with that, and other news organization. In Milwaukee, We've had great success. Some of it's tied to the Green Bay Packers. So it's what's your subject matter expertise that subscribers are willing to pay for at the appropriate price point. So we're seeing growth in the subscriber model. That's the push of the New York Times and the Washington Post. That's not to take away the fact that you're still seeing declines on the print side without a doubt. So, but at the end of the day, this is what we play with. We're just in the middle of the budget meetings at USA Today and Gannett. But I will tell you that this comes from the CEO on down. There's not a day that we don't go to sleep knowing that at all costs we're going to protect investigative reporting and what we do to serve our local communities.
Meantime, NPR is doing pledge drives all the time, right? Joey,
That's a growing opportunity, no doubt. NPR.
Television stations are cutting back. I mean,
well, I mean, one of the things about public radio is that we go to the consumers and say, what do you think this is worth? And so we get a message from our audience all the time. Every 6 months, we get a message from our audience. The different member stations get a message about what kind of value they assign to the work that we're doing. And that can guide us and should guide us in the decisions we make about how we cover stories. I mean, there are other organizations other than NPR. There's ProPublica now. There's something, a little small regional Belt magazine that I really love. There's, I want to get the Texas, it's the
Tribune?
Yes, it's the Texas Tribune. It did a lot of work around family separation at the border. There are organizations out there that are embracing this model because you engage passionately in news collecting and you draw an audience that's very passionate about getting that information. And that I think is a good model. It's not necessarily going to make anybody rich, but it'll keep the journalism
And I'm kind of a glass half full girl on that because I actually think, we'll have fewer and fewer multi-million-dollar television news anchors, right? I mean, I think the day of that is over. But, sorry guys. But, I just think that that's over. But on the other hand, and there'll be fewer giant news organizations by the same term. But on the other hand, there are all these different, smaller, localized or narrowly focused niche publications. The downside is when you start turning them into subscriber models, you do also sort of narrow that. And you could create more hyper-partisanship, not only on the political level, but you separate your audience so much. If I got to pay for it, if I got to pay for all my local news, I really have to stop and think about whether I want to do that. Do I want to subscribe to SPA? What do I want to subscribe to? And how is that going to limit the fullness of my information if I'm only buying that? But I'll pay for NPR.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next question.
Yes,
Up
please.
there?
Anybody else? Okay.
Students. Yay! Yay, students!
So we're all about to go home for Thanksgiving break, and I always get questions from my family members about wanting to join the journalism world, and they like to criticize it. Do you have any responses potentially that you
ask them if they're willing to pay for law school.
But it's true. All of these kids are getting a little bit of grief, from Aunt Helen and Uncle Fred, over the stuffing and the gravy. Sure. So what do they say? Chris, you're the youngest guy here. Yeah. What do you say?
I actually, my grandma didn't say it to me directly, but my mom told me when I was still a student actually, which wasn't so long ago. She was like, "Yeah, your grandma, she's really worried about if that's going to be a safe job." I didn't have to talk to her about it. Yeah, it is interesting.
Which safe did she mean? Did she mean safe where you make a salary?
My grandma's from Colombia, so there was this element of as you just said, I mean, journalists get killed in other countries. That doesn't really happen here, but there's still, you put yourself in danger sometimes. So it's not just a reputation thing but yeah, that's also a reality. You sometimes are put in the line of danger in this job, and but that's it's a kind of a noble career, right? You're pursuing the truth, and you need people to do that.
So you got to pitch it that way, right?
Yeah, certainly.
There's a lot of jobs out there. Tell your parents just to look at the Gannett career site. We have hired more students. We continue to hire students. We got a cat a year and a half ago out of grad school, got hired. His parents, what are you doing? Guess what? Out of grad school, Pulitzer finalist this year for a project that was his grad school project on the abuse of truckers in California. We got young folks coming out of J school getting jobs and doing amazing work. The jobs are there. If you've got their heart and you want to do it, tell your parents, this is where my heart is. Let the rest happen.
And at your age, if you don't love it now, what hope do you have when you're 30?
Oh, yeah.
You know, you've got to go to some place that you love and figure it out first.
And I hate saying this, but it's important work. It's actually in the First Amendment of the Constitution that we're supposed to have a free press. Yeah. So I hate ascribing too much nobility to journalism, but at the end of the day, it isn't the enemy of the people. It is, for the most part, about supporting and keeping a democracy thriving in a place that doesn't have state-run media. I know we can debate maybe that there are a few that could be close. It doesn't have a population that's illiterate. It from a media standpoint at least, I mean, look, I can argue a whole bunch of things, but I would tell your parents and your relatives and everything else that, would you criticize me if I came home and I said I wanted to be an artist and paint the rest of my life?
Probably.
It depends on how much they paid for school. Right. I mean, that's really, but I think like everything, I think the best answer to that is your passion. If you can express your passion for this and that you want to do this, then you're going to always be criticized, sometimes by relatives, sometimes by the people you attempt to cover and interview. And I would say to you that I do think no matter what, if you have a passion for something, if you believe in something, get out of bed every day and try to serve that purpose. And there are so many people who don't have a passion, who go to work and punch a clock or do the job, and they don't live that. And most every journalist I know lives with some passion.
One last question.
Oh, very good.
Gus.
This is more on a darker tone, but with every year more and more shootings are happening, mass shootings or mass injuries with stabbing, those type of things. There's a lot more conversation of how much attention do you give the perpetrator of these events, and are you creating a figurehead, making someone famous for having these events, and how much time are you focusing on the victims? And so while you're trying to serve the people and say, this is why this event happened, this is who this was, these were the events leading up to this attack, there's also people saying, that person made the news. I mean, whether that's true or not, people are thinking, hey, that person made the news, that's going to cause someone else to do something similar. So in the real newsroom, how does that affect how much print enters on print, or how much news time do you give to the perpetrator of these events?
If I may, when I worked for 60 Minutes, we covered the second mass shooting in America that nobody heard of. It was in Alaska, in Bethel, Alaska. It took 3 planes to get there. The shooter was Evan Ramsey. He went into the school, he shot the football hero, he shot the principal, they both were dead. Evan is in prison in Alaska and will be for the rest of his life. And when I interviewed him and said, Evan, why did you do this? He said, I realize someone's going to come after me, and today I'm just yesterday's news. I think we've become very careful about not spending too much time on the shooter, but to not know who the shooter is to not understand that most of them are young, white, disenfranchised males who've been dissed, who have been outliers. We need to know what that profile is. At the same time, we seriously honor and respect the lives that have been lost. And I think there has been a more careful balance. Do you agree, disagree?
Yeah, we've had that yesterday. We've had this talk for months because think about all the shootings that we've had. I think about I mentioned it to the group today, about just the reporters in Florida. They had the Pulse nightclub shooting, the massacre at the Fort Lauderdale airport, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and then you can go on and on and on. And the point is not to glorify the shooter, but did we name the shooter? Did we just call him, even using that term shooter, because then you go, then the person, the victim, do they become the target? But it's just, but you have to be able to, you need to tell the story of who this person is. So you don't want to, you need to be sensitive and not sensationalize it, but you also want to make sure you're doing justice by those who died and whose dreams were destroyed. So it's a real, that's a great question because we're having that very discussion and it's not just us because it's that balance. I did talk yesterday, I was talking to an FBI profiler and he was asking me, I was asking about this very thing, and he says, look, you may think that you write about this and it's going to set people off, but the reality is you don't really know what's that trigger. And he was mentioning the shooter in Pittsburgh who had a lot of vitriol on these websites and so forth, but the discussion there is that since he's alive is at some point can you get to him to say what triggered you at that moment that you decided to go from blogging and putting stuff in here to just going out the door. So that's a great question. I'm glad, again, this is why you're at a great school and all of you have such thoughtful, great questions you're asking. You're all going to have a great career because the way you're taking things very seriously.
That sounds like a wrap.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much.
Well done.
Thanks very much to everyone on our panel and to everyone here for coming out to start your Friday night. And my wish for you is safe travels and better weather.
Or mics?
Yes, let's keep the microphones here, please. Yes, good. Some people.